He shouted at his mom, "What have you done?" and told her to leave immediately. Hello, welcome to another episode of Criminal Patrol. A few years ago, specifically in 2019, the WHO, which is the World Health Organization, added another disease to its list of illnesses. What is it called? This disease is playing computer games. Various types of games have become a disease to such an extent that it's simply an addiction. An addiction that makes you think about nothing else but playing on the computer. Even if the whole world is falling apart, if there's no other life, that person, sick and consumed by addiction, just keeps playing all the time. Of course, it's not about every kind of game. It's about the situation when playing on the computer becomes an illness. So outside of the game, no other world exists. We don't function, we don't live. Our life comes down to just sitting and playing. Tomasz and Katarzyna were exactly the same age, 48. They had been married for over 20 years. At first they were doing so to speak, but Tomasz, together with his partner Piotr, came up with the idea that they would transport grain. Well, that's basically what it came down to. It turned out that this idea was great and profitable. They started making a lot of money, so their standard of living automatically went up. And as their standard of living went up, they had a nice house on Powstańców-Warszawy Street. All of this happened in Ząbkowice Śląskie. They had a nice car and could go on vacation. That's how well things started going for them. Katarzyna, who worked at a flower shop, decided to quit her job and devote herself to what was happening at home. And there was really a lot going on at home, because not only did they have to maintain the house, but they also had 3 boys of different ages. The oldest, Karol, was practically already an adult independent and basically lived in Wrocław. His parents were probably the proudest of him. They were the proudest of him because he first studied at the University of Wrocław, then at the Polytechnic. The middle one is Marcel, an 18-year-old who attended high school in a math and computer science track. And the youngest, Kasper, just 7 years old, who was in the 1st grade. Well, you know, the youngest is always the apple of the parent's eye. Especially his mother, Katarzyna, took care of him. Their father, Tomasz, also wanted to have a good relationship with his sons. It should be said that he himself enjoyed those mountain hikes. He often took the boys with him. They took a tent, bonded, and talked. You could really see that between the father and his sons there was a bond, there was chemistry, they liked each other, they enjoyed going on trips together. Tomasz also made sure that his relationships with the children were really strong. But it also has to be said that the fact they were wealthy by Polish standards didn't go to their heads. The neighbors said they were a normal family with principles. The boys also go to church. So, well, they definitely had a good opinion, I would say. And about the parents, about Tomek, about Katarzyna, and about the boys whom they met, whom they talked to. A family in the neighbor's opinion that sticks together and has certain values. And a family that you simply want to have as your neighbors. So their life was going well pretty much all the time. There weren't any major problems. Especially not financial ones until December 2019, exactly on December 8th. The oldest of the boys, Karol, well, he was in Wrocław at that time. At around 2 a.m., he gets a phone call. It's Marcel calling the younger brother. He is clearly shaken and tells his brother that there are probably burglars, thieves in the house, or maybe thugs. He is scared and doesn't know what to do. Carol advises him to just hide. They know there's a way to get out onto the roof using the ladder. He advises his brother to just go out onto the roof, to hide there, and to notify the police. That's exactly what happens. Marcel calls the police. He informs them that there are some intruders in the house, and the police are on their way to the scene. The police officers arrive very quickly. It takes about 10 minutes. They go inside, but what they found could have really shaken even the most experienced police officer. Of course, robberies do happen. Sometimes they are very brutal, but still, it's a robbery. Usually, when criminals commit a robbery, they try to either escape at the moment of danger or scare the household members. But in this case, it was different. In fact, there was blood all over the apartment. All the things were thrown out of the drawers. The whole apartment was ransacked. Clearly, those who came inside were looking for something. Well, it looked like it was just a regular robbery. But when the police officers went inside, it was a real shock. In the bedroom where Tomek and Katarzyna were, their bodies were found. Like I said, there was a lot of blood. It looked like Tomek and Katarzyna were murdered by being struck with some kind of object. It looked like it was simply an axe. When the police officers went to the next room, to the room where little Kacper was, unfortunately, the situation repeated itself. Someone was also murdered in the same brutal way with an axe. That 7-year-old boy as well. And for everyone, of course, it was a shock, disbelief. The whole town of Ząbkowice-Śląskie watched all of this in disbelief. A home invasion like that is extremely rare in Poland. Marcel, the one who survived, said that when he woke up, he was actually woken up by some noises. He realized that there were intruders in the apartment. First, he called his brother, and on his brother's advice, he called the police. Well, thanks to that, according to what he said, he managed to survive. Well, Marcel, this 18-year-old boy, as I told you, was going to high school. He was a student, I would say, rather average, maybe even a bit weak. But it also turned out that when he was at risk, when he needed to catch up in some subjects or was in danger of failing something, he would pull himself together and manage to handle it. So it was clear from that he had some potential. He just didn't really want to study. As for his behavior, there weren't any major concerns. His classmates said that sometimes he kept to himself, that he avoided others. Sometimes he's with others, but he's not a dominant figure. Similarly, the school principal said that there were no problems with him. There was no information that he was causing any trouble for the teachers. But of course, the principal looks at it from a different perspective, focusing more on behavior than on schoolwork or how he was around other students. So you could say he was rather an average student and someone who didn't really stand out in a group. One thing is, the homeroom teacher said he had quite a lot of absences from school. And here, Katarzyna, the boy's mother, would probably be the most surprised, because the routine was that she drove him to school every morning. Well, she would be surprised because, as I said, the routine was that every morning Katarzyna would put the youngest one, Kasper, and also Marcel into the car and drive him to school. And she saw Marcel simply going into the school. But she didn't know that Marcel wasn't actually going to class. And right behind the door, he was checking if his mom was leaving. When she disappeared around the corner, he would leave the school, go back home to his room, turn on the computer, and play games. He played for hours, he played for days. He didn't go to school, he just sat at the computer and played. Well, you have to admit he was great, that he was a master at those computer games. It was even his passion. He even created a few accounts where he talked about games, explained what strategies to use to get through the next levels. His friends respected him because he was so good that whenever there were team games, everyone wanted him on their team. The only thing was that Marcel didn't go to school, he just kept playing his games all the time. And this went on for many months. After many months, the homeroom teacher decided to call the parents and tell them that the boy was at risk of simply not moving on to the next grade. The parents wanted to talk to him, but it turned out that Marcel didn't want to talk to them at all, that these bonds built over the years simply broke somewhere along the way, that he doesn't want to talk. He's basically kind of aggressive, he's indifferent. Naturally, the atmosphere at home became very tense. The parents tried to talk to him, tried to reach him somehow, tried to reason with him, and on the other hand, he wanted to get away from those nagging parents, from their constant nagging. So naturally, he continued to engage only in what he liked most, which was playing games. He sat in his room and played, not responding to anything his parents said to him. Again, this went on for quite a while. After some time, he realized that if he kept acting this way and avoiding conversation, his parents wouldn't let him play on the computer. He was cunning, just like someone who is in the grip of an addiction and is willing to promise, swear, and assure anything to achieve his goal, that things will be different. That was the case with Marcel. When his parents threatened to turn off his computer, he said he would change, that he would stop playing, and that he would focus on his studies. I think that probably lulled his parents for a while. Maybe it gave them some hope, some belief that things would actually get better. But things didn't get better. And Katarzyna, the mother, realized it very quickly, that Marcel is simply lying, that he hasn't changed his behavior, that his whole world is still just games. Marcel's mother intuitively sensed that they were simply losing this fight for her son's future, for Marcel's future, that he's just pretending. She was frustrated. One day she went into his room. She saw that as usual he was just playing games. He had his headphones on. She started talking to him. She started yelling, but he didn't respond. Maybe he just couldn't hear her. Lost somewhere in his game, still with his headphones on. So, desperate, she walked over and pulled the plug from the monitor. Well, his whole world suddenly went dark. He, suddenly got up from the computer. He was like some kind of enraged man who suddenly woke up from a stupor. He shouted at his mom, "What have you done, you?" And he told her to get out immediately. Well, mom stood there confused. First, because he used that vulgar word. Secondly, his aggression. She didn't want to leave the room. He approached her and he practically forced his mother out the door. I think that was some kind of turning point in all of this. Of course, Katarzyna told Tomasz, the father. They started discussing what to do. They came to a conclusion. They took, I would say, the hardline approach that seemed most appropriate to them. They decided that they would simply keep him away from the computer. Tomasz told him that he wouldn't be able to play for 2 months. He also took away his smartphone and he told him to apologize to his mother. Marcel did it with a kind of strange politeness, courteously, as if he had come to terms with all of it. Well, probably a psychologist might have noticed that it was all an act. The parents didn't realize that from then on Marcel simply had revenge on his mind. The police officers who were at the crime scene realized pretty quickly that Marcel was simply lying. First of all, there were no signs of a break-in. No one had broken into the house. And it's obvious that, like any other house, this one was locked at night. Secondly, the attackers, the killers, didn't leave any traces. There was literally nothing. Well, they would have to be more like some kind of virtual characters or even ghosts to not leave any traces after such a massacre. That's why the police officers decided to detain Marcel and take him in for questioning. And here it quickly turned out that Marcel was actually lying. That Marcel started talking, he began to tell the story. For him, those 2 months without a computer, without the possibility of playing games, was simply unimaginable to him. He couldn't stand the thought that he wouldn't be able to play, because after all, he didn't have any other passion. He didn't have any friends, he didn't play any sports, he didn't go anywhere either. So his whole world was just those games. He decided that everything would change if he got rid of those who stood in the way of him being able to keep playing in peace. Those things, so to speak, were his parents and his little brother Kacper. He was just waiting for the right moment when the oldest brother left and went back to university in Wrocław. He decided that he would carry out his revenge. It was exactly December 8th. In the evening, he said goodnight to everyone in a rather ominous way. And then he went to his room. During the day, he had already taken an axe from the garage, from a small garage next to the house. It was an axe that Tomasz often used. He made sure it was always well sharpened. He kept the axe by his bed. He waited until everyone fell asleep until he heard that it was quiet. He took the axe and went first to his parents' room. They were both asleep. First he hit him in the head. He killed his father. He did it 3 times. It was only on the 3rd time that he crushed his father's skull. Mom woke up. She woke up. He struck twice. First he hit the collarbone. And then he aimed for the head. After he killed his parents, he went to his brother's room. Kacper didn't even wake up. And in the same brutal way, he killed his brother too. After the murder, well, he thought for a bit. Then the killer went to the bathroom, took a shower, washed up, and changed into different clothes. He packed the blood-stained clothes, took them out of the house, and hid them about 200 meters from the house. Then he came back, pulled out drawers, and took out various things and objects. He threw everything around to make it look like it was a robbery and that robbers had ransacked the apartment. And then he did what he actually did, which was call his brother. He told him that there were burglars in the house, and then he called the police. Marcel also considered various ways to avoid responsibility for this crime. No, he thought that maybe he could leave the country. When he was taking all those things out of the drawers, he found 9,000 zlotys, almost 90,000 zlotys. He figured that maybe he could go abroad. He came to the conclusion that it didn't make sense after all, so he decided to stage the whole crime. He came to the conclusion that maybe this way he could simply fool the police, that the police would think it was really some kind of robbery. Marcel was examined, a young guy, only 18 years old. Here, experts from the Zina Institute issued an opinion stating that he is characterized by very strong egocentrism and selfishness, that he blamed his brother and parents for his failures, that he nursed this desire for revenge, that one day he would do it. At first it was vague and illusory, and then over time this desire for revenge took clearer shape, until finally he did it. On April 13, 2022, so as you can see, just 4 years ago, the court in Świdnica issued a verdict. He was sentenced to life imprisonment for another 3 murders. In total, probably because he was only 18 years old, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole, eligibility for parole after 25 years. If he gets out, which is of course possible, he will be 43 years old, so he will still be a relatively young man. How he will continue to live after committing such a crime is, of course, a completely different question. Well, sometimes we also say that we make these episodes as a warning. Finally, as I said at the beginning, we're talking about a situation when gaming becomes an addiction. Various experts say that these games sometimes also have a beneficial effect, allowing for completely different ways of thinking. The problem is when this second life, often on the computer, becomes the first and the real life. A life that completely consumes the life we're actually living. Maybe it's some kind of compensation because in everyday life we experience failures. It's hard to overcome those failures sometimes, but on a computer you can repeat everything many times until you succeed. Maybe that's what makes us use the computer so often. It draws you in. Well, there's also this, let's call it a joke, although I wouldn't really call it a joke. But someone recently said, half jokingly, that thanks to a computer system failure, a son found his mother who was living alone in the next room. And that's it for today's episode. Also, as I said, as a warning, of course, subscribe to our channel, and as always, take care.